Good to go.
Thanks, Claire. All right, I'm going to shift to share. And we're continuing. So Mike Arduzer's not here. Neither is Rob Jean, who are sort of the heavyweights in terms of looking at Andrena subgenera. So I'll plow through Mike's key, and most of it's pretty straightforward. It's always good to have their insights, particularly since Mike's the developer, but they can't make it for a variety of reasons today. And let me finish the share thing here, and we will flip back and forth between resources online, and we can use the microscope too. So last time we stopped at Holandrena, and if we go back, we're really talking basically one species. So if we look at Holandrena here in the Discover Life male Andrena key, we have to work on our alphabeticalness. I guess it's more than one species, but there's Andrena cressonii is the one in the east that really is a species that people come into contact with. There are several others here. Those are Western, and I'm unfamiliar with them, so we're really going to focus on the aspects of Andrena cressonii. And let me show, it's very distinctive. It's the kind of thing that in the male is gives itself away almost right away by just looking at it. So we'll go to a picture here. So here's a picture, and it's the face that's really the distinctive part in the male. In the female, it's trickier, and we spoke about that last time. Here, you're looking at a incredibly wide head for an Andrena, and you have a completely yellow clypeus. These little spots here are often in Andrena species males, and so we're ignoring them. And then there are the paraocular areas. So these are the areas outside of the clypeus, which is running like that are also yellow. So, but the tricky thing is, and I think maybe we mentioned this last time, 1 out of 200, 250 or so are not going to look like this. Big chunks of the yellow are missing and replaced with usually something that would be called maybe a brownish cast to the integument. And I have not seen this, I don't believe, but I think Mike was mentioning, maybe Rob, was that in a few cases there can be nothing there. So all the yellow is gone, but usually you have indications that something is up. In other words, it's not all black integument. And but just to let people know, this can erode quite a bit away and often in a patchy kind of approach, and it's still that species. So there's a strong within Mike's key here. Let's go back. We're working in an area here with Holandrena. So these are all males that have a strong pronotal collar and also have yellow on the clypeus, at least some yellow on the clypeus. And we've worked our way down to here, and specifically Mike has here listed in contrast to the previous one, which was very simple, 2 submarginal cells versus 3 submarginal cells. So the 2 were that Parandrena group, which are willow specialists and small, and then 3 submarginals, which is basically the most common aspect to Andrena. But one has to be aware that Andrena and many other bee species can drop a submarginal boundary line. So it looks like there are 2, but if you look at the opposite wing, a lot of times you'll see that it is 3 there. So I'm going to sneeze, I think, and I'm going to turn away now. If I say that, I never sneeze. So anyway, back to the subgenera. So that's Holandrena, and what we're seeing is tergites densely, and this is a characteristic in the females in particular that's useful, very densely pitted throughout the entire tergite, so it's not different from the impressed area or the base area. And then you have paraocular maculae present. So we also have several other members, so apparently this holds true for them also. So these are the areas to the side of the clypeus, and when they talk about maculae here, that's the fancy term for they have yellow markings of some kind. And those markings are large and usually occupying a good chunk of that parocular area. And so scutum and scutum with scattered but obvious pits, even at low magnification. I'm not sure how that plays in. It's not something I look at when I'm addressing whether I have Andrena cressonii or not. Again, like with bird watching, some species you just know without having to look at the field guide again. This is one of them. So the contrast is that your tergites have are weakly punctate at most, and we'll give that green, and usually without pictures. So impunctate is again a fancy word for there are no pits visible. And then the parocular maculae, so the yellow markings to the side of the clypeus, are usually absent and rarely present. So often in these other groups here, when they are present, they're small restricted dots of yellow, and a lot of times, usually right on the suture between the clypeus and the parocular area, and usually people overlook them, but specifically they have to be addressed because they would be a marking in the parocular area, but they're restricted and small, and usually they're not there at all. And here it's saying scutum is usually completely unpitted. So that brings us to these final two, again, both with strong, pronotal angles to their pronotum, and also yellow clypeus areas. And so here we're separating two. One is super common, Larandrena. That's basically Andrena miserabilis, and not Andrena. I also read that as not Andrena, but it's, I think, Notandrena perhaps. So here, this is mostly more of a Midwestern species and not an Eastern species, and this other one is quite common everywhere. Let's take a quick look at distributionally where these things show up, or at least the species. So Notandrena, I think, are mostly specialists. I know the one is on a roadside plant, Notandrena, although Jack Neff notes that a lot of times he doesn't, he sees tons of the onion-related Notandrena and does not get this Andrena species on it. There's some question there. And this Andrena triquestra is primarily Texas and a little bit more to the west of there, but not a lot. It's relatively restricted, but now found in Arkansas. So should be looked for. This North Scortii or North Scorti has also shown up. Here, let's see if the distributions show. But you can see primarily Midwestern, but there's now records here in the Southeast, and is probably, another group of Andrena that are overlooked quite a bit. So trying to get back to the guide here. Here we go. And we'll go to the bottom. So that's the Notandrena group. And then the other one is what was the name of that? Larandrena, which will be miserabilis, I believe, entirely. Larandrena, there's the box. Has only one marked, so that should be our friend, miserabilis. And so we'll go back to the guide and we'll look at some pictures of miserabilis, the other species I don't have photos of at this point in Discover Life. So here in the males,
Sam, I have a question.
Yeah.
With the Notandrena or Notandrena, with the females, I made a note that said, you said that this group has a different kind of look, like a big head, some kind of different kind of architecture. true for the males also, or is that a female kind of vibe?
Yeah, I don't have any in the collection, and it's not something that I've run into in the males. So I've run into it in a female, and I didn't know what I was looking at the time, partially because it was in Tennessee or Georgia, and it was like way out of range. So I can't answer that. Um, uh, when you look at the character here, Gina posterior margin carinate. So that's the cheek. And what it's saying is there's a raised line around the edges, very similar in a way. Again, I don't have a picture, but would be similar in a way to the species that are on the Swida group of um, the cornice. So those would be the shrubby dogwoods of different kind, and they all have this carina, this raised area that it in different ways borders the cheek. Let's see if we can find a picture of that because it's pretty distinctive. Again, sadly, I don't have the species, but we can look at a carina lining the cheek here in the guides. And let's, out of curiosity, let's look and see if there is any picture in Discover Life under Notandrena put there by someone else. I really have to learn spelling, and there we go.
You have
And
a Nothascordy male in Flickr, but I'm not sure if we can see the Gina well.
okay. Oh, you mean that we have taken a picture of one?
It's on
Oh,
Flickr.
amazing. Okay, let's go into there and go to, we'll open up a new Flickr window. And these would have a series, but that's not always the case. Is it North Skirty or is Noth? How do we spell that? I think I'm spelling
Nothos.
All right, no R. I think I have to start over with this thing. NothorScordi, correct? Oh, maybe not a R after that.
Oh, I was muted and trying to tell you things. Yeah, no R.
There we go.
Nothoscordi.
Oh, here. Okay. Yeah, we may have the very picture. I didn't realize it. So here we have, although oddly, I thought these were supposed to have much reduced paraocular maculae, and I believe Mike identified this. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. That's in the key. So too bad Mike's not here. But indeed, look at that carina here. So carina equals raised line, Gina equals cheek. And you can see this thickened area that goes right along there. And that's a pretty unique combination. They also talked about the back, which I think we do have a back shop here, being largely unpitted, and I still see some pits in there, interestingly. So I wonder, yeah, we might have to revisit both that specimen and or the key here because so if we go back down to the proper place, we're talking about tergites 1 to 4, weakly pitted, usually in punctate, paraocular maculae usually absent, rarely present, and large. Oh, well, it says rarely present and large, so I guess that encompasses what we just saw. Scutum usually, although apparently not always, unpitted. Now, if we look at Notandrena, which we just were, Gina posterior margin carinate, check, very dramatically show, and all the way up to behind and touching the eye. Paraocular area is yellow, at least in part. Okay, we can go with that. Rare species. I don't know where I got that there was no pitting on the back, just reduced. Okay, so that seems like a relatively straightforward species to identify with those characters. Now, if we look at the next one, so this is going to be our very common Andrena miserabilis, which may be more than one species, according to several people's sort of inspections of specimens, including ours. So here, the cheek does not have that margin and is not carinate. In other words, there's not got a raised line around it. It's just normal cheek. The paraocular area is dark without maculae. Okay, so I think I overemphasized that these maculae were tiny in this group, and that is not the case, as we can, again, going back here. Those are substantial enough, and it's also pretty wide like cressonii, but reduced pitting on the abdomens. Let's see if we can see that. Yeah, so you can see the pitting here on the abdomen in this upper part, quite widely spaced, several pit diameters apart, whereas in cressonii, they are basically lying on top of each other. So let's now, Andrena miserabilis, which should have specimens lined up here, get out of cressonii land and back to album. And back to album list. These are all in the collections section of, oops, I went too far perhaps, of view my collections of Flickr, our Flickr account, and you can make your own with, I believe, species. Why did I click on Euclides? Elsewhere than your own collection. Stephen Falk showed me how to do that from Britain. So now we're going to go to Andrena miserabilis. There we go. And there is a male right on deck. So yellow, black paraocular outside of the clypeus. And we look at some of the other characteristics here. If we can find the side, we should see no raised line. I'm not sure we need to look at that because no raised line is what we mostly see in Andrena species. And the opposite character is the one we were just looking at. And so that's pretty much it. In the female, this has a very polished central area. In the male, whenever there's a yellow clypeus involved, it's also very difficult to see what's going on in terms of pit and pitting inside that yellow area. So it's usually not described. But the sort of combination in the east of spring species, yellow with strong pronotal ridges is often going to be miserabilis. And in Discover Life, you can key it through the whole system and come out with what that species might be. I'm not sure. Oh, I can tell you, I believe this is true in the males as well. Let's see if we can find a back photo of this. That's the abdomen. Or is it the thorax?
What are you looking at? Because I was gonna say that there's a bit in Discover Life. I put it in the chat from Joel, extracted from Joel Gardner's material, that says that the male has where did it go? Both sexes have a pronotal angle and ridge, which is usually weak in the female but strong in the male. And I don't think we've talked about that dimorphism before.
Yeah. So, and that's a generality too. So, if there's a weak pronotal collar or ridge in the female, it's usually quite strong and often dramatically so in the male. So, in general, that's sort of how all the Andrena run. This is actually a thorax, one of our early shots where we're like, let's take apart a specimen. And you can, though, see, so this is where the head attachment was, and this is the now exposed pronotal collar. Normally the head is covering this section, and you can see an indication of this sharp corners to the pronotal collar and a cliff on the other side, which you can't see, but some indication that that probably does have a strong pronotal ridge. And then back here, the scutellum, although not perhaps the best of shots, because there's a little bit of flicks of goo from the specimen preparation, it tends to be very shiny. And that is a good indication of Andrena miserabilis when I've got a question about it in the males and the females. Let's see if that's going to show on the side. There's the front. Oh, here's our pronotor collar without the head. We should keep this shot somewhere. So here again, this is where the head was attached. This whole area, so the pronotum and the pronotal collar. So the pronotum, the collar, which is mostly what we see because we kind of see it when we look down from above, and the head, though, is obscuring actually a quite large feature here. So this all is a pronotum. There's the pronotal lobes over there, and the pronotum then expands out to the sides and runs down. But most of that's hidden by the head. And when we talk about pronotal ridges and collars and angles and that kind of thing, so here you can see is the angle-like mouse ears, so it's pulled away. Again, it's always best to see this under the microscope, but you're seeing this rounded area is what's the best way to describe it? Is pulled away from the scutum area and is creating some form of angle down the sides. And if you did not have a sharp pronotal collar angle situation, this would just curve right down. You wouldn't see these ear-like lobes there. It'd be just straight down. I'm not sure I'm illuminating anything that way or not. And there's the female, and we're looking at females here, but this central shiny area and the scutellum is a really unusual feature within Andrena, to have something where you have the scutum obscured by tessellations and ridges and fingerprinting and whatever you want to call it. And then this is all very shiny, very much mirror-like in its presentation. So a good indication of a Andrena miserabilis. Okay, so let's go back to the guide. So we've left this area. Now, if you look, you see it says 2. So this section now is referring to still with a pronotum with these dorsal ventral ridge or angle present. So it has that, but what it doesn't have is the clypeus is not yellow or ivory. The clypeus is dark, so there are no maculations. And that, in Mike's key here, throws us right into Tylandrena, which brings up some issues. So let's go there. Let's go to the Discover Life E, which I jumped out of there for a second, and we will go back down to the bottom where we can look at subgenera groups. Now, under basically the last several decades approach to subgenera, Tylandrena would include, I'm working on my spelling here, there it is, a fair number of species, eastern ones including Erythroglaster, Perplexa, Maffei, and such. But as we've mentioned several times, there's been these molecular people messing around with this traditional system. So, for example, Perplexa in the old school way was a Tylandrena, but if you click on it now, it's listed as Melandrena, which has makes a little bit of sense. One of the characteristics of Melandrena in general is that the ocelli are set way back from the edge of the head. And in Perplexa, that's also the case. There's the ocelli and the head rim is there. It's about 2 or more ocelli diameters, which is quite large. And Perplexa as a species is also quite large. So, you know, we have to always swing with what the changes are. Right now, we're sticking with the old Andrena subgenera in terms of keying because that's what people know, and the people haven't looked at all the different Andrena species at the level to which you would want to be able to ascribe subgenera and look at divisions of subgenera. But there's going to be a bunch of changes. So I think within the guide, we'll now rename that this one here, the old subgenera system. And then we'll start creating a new one that's more up to date, but it'll be partial for quite a while. Anyway, Tylandrena includes, bring that list back up here. It's already up. Let me just refresh it in this way. A list of, a lot of these are relatively large species, the ones that are in the east that I'm familiar with. Again, some matching with Melandrena, and I'm not sure all of these. Let's look at Erythrograster. Went to Melandrena. It also went to Melandrena. So perhaps the whole thing has disappeared. But we're going with the old guide. So the old guide would have separated out them from Melandrena by the fact that Melandrena largely has a smooth pronotal collar, and Tylandrena, at least the Perplexa, has a sharp pronotal ridges on its collar, and several other things too that differentiate it from the other species of Melandrena. So here we look at what Mike's written about the traditional Tylandrena group, pronotum with dorsal ventral ridge crossed or terminated by a deep sulcus. So I doubt we have that, and it's going to be a difficult thing to show, I think, although maybe we can, if there's time, we can dial back. I can try and pull a specimen and see if we can see this. So you have a ridge down the pronotum. This is the dorsal ventral ridge, and that ridge can, in most species, if they're present, is going to be unbroken. So it's just a ridge. So now imagine that you have a ridge, and then in the middle of that, you slice into it, often at an oblique angle, and create a valley. So sulcus is usually a valley, like a narrow channel that's sunken on something. So in this case, they refer to it as a deep, narrow sulcus. It's basically slicing through that dorsal ventral ridge, breaking it up into more than two parts. And then the alternative is that there is none. So that sulcus is not there and not terminated deeply. So this group has that combination of characters, and the next group does not.
So we do have a good picture of that characteristic on the Andrena Perplexa Discover Life page.
Let's take a look.
Yeah, it's of a female, but it's the same thing that's happening. So we can see what it looks like.
It may not be as prominent. So just in terms of Perplexa, which is the one that in the East most prominently comes up, they also have David has here, the label process is usually bidentate. From this view, it doesn't look particularly bidentate, but below there are two. Let's see if we can dive in there. So if you angled it a little bit differently, you'd see that there's a large indentation. This is a good notion, though, that you have to play around with these pictures often. Oops, that is too much. And these specimens to see whether it's bidentate or not. And sometimes you can't, and so you should not use that character. Going back to Perplexa pictures. So, so here's males and females from that different picture will have, right, this is from Lawrence Packer. You can see also big cheek, huge long mandibles in that particular species. And I'm not sure that, so we're in the area. Discover Life is showing its limitations in terms of the size of the picture that we can see. Really, this is a problem both in photography and also a problem in um, uh, in real life. Like that's an area that's hard to see into because you're between, over here would be the sides, so that's the mesopisternum, and then here's the head, and that head can be cocked different ways. But if we use our imagination, here's the pronotal ridge running down, and this is the trough, the sulcus crossing it through there. Not a great shot, but you're getting an idea of place and activity. You can see the ridginess there, even though Lawrence's shot is not super duper high def. Let's see, maybe there's something else in here. But that vibe, deep cheek, big, huge mandibles, and pronotal collar usually leads you right to Perplexa. And you're working on it. I guess I looked through a lot of these things. Let's just click on Perplexa again.
Yeah, if you scroll to the bottom, go to Perplexa and scroll to the bottom of the thumbnails. It's the one on the bottom left, just under that cheek one. There you go. So female, but still feature. Down.
Furthermore. Oh. Yeah, we may have that. Who did that? Did we do that, or
Yeah,
did
that
the
was
other lab? Okay. So so here is the head, and here is the ridge, and I'm not sure that the so it says distinct pronotal angle and ridge and suture. So the suture to me is not super visible. It might be there going through the ridge, but you can at least see the ridge at this point behind the head. Let's see if we have another. There's an amazing number of pictures in Discover Life sometimes. So here's the head again. There's the angle, but you can't see the ridge any longer. Here is just the head, and I believe that the pronotum is not.
Don't think it's attached.
Yeah, can't quite tell what's going on there. Okay, so we may have reached the angle. If there's time, I can jump up and pull a specimen of the Perplexa and see if we can see that. But that's like everyone, we have problems seeing the pronotal angle and the pronotal collar. And then you add, oh, there also is a sulcus slicing through that, and it gets tricky. So maybe we'll come back to that because that is a useful thing to try and see. But so maybe let's see, we have time. Let me go try and find a specimen because I've got the camera all set up.
Sounds good.
Right there. Okay. All right. We have specimens. Andrena perplexa. Flip to the microscope here and make sure that it is on. It is. And let's take a quick look under the other microscope to see that we have something visible here. Oof. Let me try a different one. Pretty good. One more here. And I probably will just knock a head off.
You probably have enough of them to do that.
Yep. Always a little reluctant, but we'll sacrifice. The head wants to stay on is a problem here. Up, head is gone. All right, let's load it up onto the deck. Bring down the magnification. Something that can be seen initially. There's the side. You're seeing a specimen without a head. We'll bring the magnification up. It's a bunch of slightly goopy hairs. All right. Move this more centrally, and then get a little bit more power in here. All right. This is reasonable. We kind of saw this in that other photo, but if we look now, this is the scutum running through here. You have this is all part of the pronotum. The head is gone here. And this angle right here would be the pronotal ridge slash collar area. And it's clearly separated from the backside of the specimen. So it's not a smooth rounded over here. There's a lot going on. And here's the sulcus running through the ridge would be going down like this, but the sulcus divides it. And the sulcus is presenting itself here as a series of pits within the side of the specimen. So it's not the kind of thing that I normally use. So I'm normally not keying things out using subgenera guides. And as we saw, there's also some changes going on. I'm looking though for this ear-like structure that's indicating that there's a ridge or that's some kind of ridge. And I'm not trying to determine whether there's a sulcus there or not, because it is often hidden by the head and is more difficult. So, but that's what they're talking about there.
Thanks.
So if we move on beyond that, so the opposite pair of the character is dorsoventral ridge of the pronotum entire. So in other words, there is no dorsal ventral ridge. Oh no, there's no sulcus. There is the ridge. So it's presented. It's not smooth, which we're going to get to way down in 17, I think. And it's not crossed by a deep narrow sulcus. So when we go there, then we're go to the next one, and basically what we're doing is we're looking at a group that has usually very prominent teeth. This is which are not prominent in the females at the base of the mandible and or measurable malar space present. So normally, like in Discover Life, we lump all the males that have these large basal teeth together, and which there are 6, and then we step through them because there's a series of different aspects, mostly having to do with hair color and antennal length, that help separate them out. With a little bit of work, it's not too difficult. But if we go back to Discover Life Guide and we see what the species are involved and why Mike put in that caveat about the length. Oops, I really want to restart the guide here. The not just the basal tooth, but the length of the malar space. Most Andrena have minute malar spaces. So when you get into something that's noticeable, so they're never long, they're not like bumblebee ones or some of the other things there, or Calides, but some are noticeable, let's call them. Okay, let me focus. Andrena sensu stricto would be the subgenus in this particular case. So let's just limit it for my sake to the eastern ones. So here I can click on east of the Mississippi, and we have a easier to deal with thing. So Carolina, that's a good example of something that doesn't have a strong basal angle on the tooth at the base, a tooth-like thing. But has a really long face. So this is largely thought to be a blueberry specialist. So a lot of blueberry specialist types of bees have really long faces because they have to stick their face way down into those long corollas, those bell-shaped corollas of that most of the vacciniums have, but not all, interestingly. And so Cornelli has the tooth, Frigida. Does that have a tooth? I can't remember. But most of these have teeth on them. And in fact, I think all the rest, maybe not Fasbii, but again, those Carolina Fasbii have this distinct malar space, which again is not greater than the width of the base of the mandible. So in bumblebees and Calides, we're often looking at some specimens that have a malar space. So the malar space is the distance from the eye to the mandible that is greater in its length than the width of the mandible. That's never the case in Andrena. So usually we're talking something that's about, a really large one would be about a fifth of the width of the mandible in terms of its distance to the mandible from the eye. So that malar length, small, but for Andrena, significant. Most of these are the teethed ones, and we would key those out in the a separate couplet. Let's see, does that show up here? I don't see it right now. We could simplify this though, and see that would be under head, cheek, carina, free apical margin, clypeus should be under mandible, clypeus, so all alphabetical should be helpful to me. There it is, formation at base. So there's the one with the distinct basal tooth. So that's what the teeth, and you can see there's one with a picture associated with it. Thank you, Dina Crumbling. So there's this long angle down there, and here's the similar picture. And then somewhere we have the species involved, which are right here. So this group shows up pretty regularly. They all have teeth. It's not all the Andrena sensu stricto species in the East, but we go through and walk you through how to tell those 6 apart, which are easy to ID based on the tooth presence. And so if we go back to Mike's key here again, so that's the Andrena group. So now when we look at the contrasting part of the couplet, it says the mandible is does not have a tooth or an angle, and without a measurable malar space. So it's basically the mandible is kissing right up against the base of the compound eye, and there is no tooth. So when we do that, we get into the Tylandrena. Let's just bring up those species so we can take a look at them. Should restart this. Go to the
Actually,
bottom.
Sam, I think maybe, unless you can wrap up, if you think Tylandrena is not going to take too long, we should start wrapping.
Okay, that's a good point. Let's just look at Tylandrena as a teaser for next time. Thank you, Claire, for keeping me on track. Oh my gosh, Andrena aerugeniae is one of the most common bees in the East in terms of total captures, but you have to be near its host plant, which is spring beauties. And in the woods, unbelievable numbers can occur until, of course, the evil lesser celandine, which is a ranunculus from Europe, comes in and wipes all of that community out. A sad story that we'll end on, apparently. Are there any questions?
It's not. We had a really small group today, and it's been quiet.
Okay. They're
So
the
I
best
think
students.
guess so. So I think next week, it sounds like we will hopefully have Mike back, but not Rob for a couple more. Yeah, he might not actually make it back until Andrena's done. So I'm not sure what we want to do with that. We'll talk about it offline.
Okay.